Our presenter today is Jackie McElroy, and Jackie McElroy is an experienced senior Apex consultant with close to 18 years of experience in IT and almost 13 in Apex. Her skills range from the requirement analysis to software design, database data model design, application development and maintenance, and Apex developer mentorship. Also, just last month, Jackie became an administrator for one of the true go-to websites for the insanely enthusiastic Oracle Apex community, and that would be apex.world. That in itself could be another webinar, but for now, let's begin. Jackie, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining and welcome to Dive into Dynamic Actions. Let's get started. What we're going to talk about is I'm going to do a little bit of introductions to some real world problems, and then we're going to go into what are dynamic actions, and of course some demo and discussion and wrap up. So I want to introduce you to some people. There are a couple of people that are really important to this presentation, and I want you to get to know them, and as we progress, we'll go through some real-world requirements that you might find in maybe some of your projects, and we're going to see if dynamic actions can help out our new friends. So this is our developer. He's just your friendly neighborhood Apex developer. Let's call him George. He's fairly new to Apex development. He has very little knowledge of JavaScript, but he's really hardworking and enthusiastic and likes to solve problems. The next person I want you to meet is our project manager. Let's call her Eva. She wants, like all project managers, she wants projects completed quickly and under budget. And George, our developer, he's super excited. He just finished a first draft of his application that his project manager had asked for. He thinks it's really great and that she's going to love it, but she reviewed it and she's given him a few things that she wants him to change, some new requirements. We all get those, right? So let's see what she thinks needs to change and see if we can help out our developer. So the first thing she wants is she wants to see on our familiar IMP table form when a job is changed to salesman, she wants the commission field to be displayed. Otherwise, if the person has any other job, she wants it to be hidden. She also would like a search bar added to the employee's report. And she wants that search to filter as she types. She doesn't want to have to press enter or any other button to see the results after she's done typing. She wants instant results. Next, if a bonus is entered, she wants the total to automatically be populated with the sum of the salary and the bonus. So there's no need for a user to manually calculate it or possibly make any mistakes. The fourth thing she wants is to be able to delete a row from her employee's report without having to navigate to the details page, press the delete button, confirm, and then go back to the original page to make sure it's deleted. Currently, the process takes a lot of clicking and window switching. She'd like to just click on the row and have everything done. The last thing that she wants to happen is to make a notification on the home page really visible to the user. She wants something that no one can ignore. So how does our developer feel when he hears this? Of course he's upset. He thought his first draft of the application was great. And if you're familiar with dynamic actions, then the requirements might sound pretty simple. But George, of course, is new to Apex. He thinks he's probably going to have to learn JavaScript, maybe jQuery, probably some CSS in order to complete the list of tasks he's been given. And he probably will have to spend a few late nights just learning these new things and studying before he can even really begin to solve his problems. So why don't we go through and see if we can help him out and maybe learn a little bit about dynamic actions. So let's get into what are dynamic actions. Dynamic actions are one of my favorite things about Apex. They're really quick and easy. They can take your application from really simple and basic to really awesome and user responsive without a lot of effort. Once you learn the basics of dynamic actions and get a foundation, you can easily build on this and really take your applications to the next level. So what are dynamic actions? Dynamic actions are a powerful tool that allow developers to quickly and easily define client-side behavior declaratively with little to no knowledge of JavaScript. And what declaratively means is that you aren't coding everything yourself. It's kind of a built-in feature of AJAX. So with a few clicks of the mouse, you can create a dynamic action, and AJAX has done most of the hard work for you, if not all of the hard work. So dynamic actions live in the client side. So the client side is your web browser. Of course, the server side is your Oracle database. Dynamic actions focus on client-side activities, so you can make changes to the look and feel of a page without submitting or refreshing the page, or in most cases, without making a call to the database. So in order to learn dynamic actions, we're going to break them down into three parts: the when, the action, and the affected element. The when of a dynamic action is when it should happen or when it should fire. These can be browser events, framework events, or component events. Some examples of a browser event is anything that the user can do to interact with the page. So actions the user can take, like some common ones would be like changing something on the page or clicking on a button, clicking on something on the page, pressing a key, focusing or losing focus on something. Framework events are events that come from AJAX itself. There are not as many of these, so like before or after a refresh, when a dialog is closed before submit, those are all framework events. Component events come from page components or items, like a calendar, interactive grid, or a tree. So when a date is selected in a calendar, that would trigger a component event. Or when the order of items in a shuttle is changed, would be an example of a component event. The when portion of the dynamic action also has this optional client-side condition. So this condition can evaluate to true or false, and it basically tells AJAX what set of actions to take when this event, when the when happens. But we're going to get a little bit more into detail in this later. I just want you to know that it exists. So what does the when look like in AJAX? If you go into the application builder and go to a page, and you click on the little lightning bolt icon or tab, then this is going to display all of your dynamic actions, and you'll see them listed below. If you click on the name of a dynamic action in the center, then you'll see the when section of the dynamic action. It's labeled when, so it's really easy to see. And you'll see like the event, what is tied to it, whether it's a button, in this case it's a button, and what that button is called. The action portion of a dynamic action is what action do you want to take. These can be true actions or false actions, which are determined by that optional client-side condition. Depending on how it evaluated would determine which set of actions, true or false, the dynamic action will take. So some examples of actions would be, some common ones are like to enable or disable something on a page, hide or show an item or region on a page, setting a value, submitting the page itself, alerting or confirming something with the user, adding or removing CSS to the page, refreshing, or executing JavaScript or even PL/SQL code. Inside of AJAX, you can find the action section by going to that same dynamic action lightning bolt tab, clicking on one of the true or false actions, and you'll see the action and any settings that apply to it. In the identification setting, you'll see the name of the action, and then below that, any settings, and those vary depending on the action you've selected. The third part of a dynamic action is the affected element. If you change the value of a page item with a dynamic action, then that item that was changed will be your affected element. Not all actions have an affected element, so this is optional, like an alert. If you alert the user to something, there's nothing that's affected by that action. Some examples of affected elements anything really on the page. You can have an item, a button, a region, anything that you can identify on the page by some sort of selector could be your affected element. So where do you find the affected elements in APEX? You go to the same place in the dynamic actions, click on a true or false action, and you'll see the affected elements section. And this you'll get a drop down where you can select the type of component that is affected and then the name of that component. All right, so I want to go through and build just a simple dynamic action to kind of see it, show it to you live. So we're going to do an alert. So I have a page, and on it I just have a region and a button. And the button right now does nothing, but I want it to alert the user when I click this button. So I'm going to go into the page, and I'm going to, you see my button. There's a couple ways that you can actually create a dynamic action. So you can find the element. So what is the when of this dynamic action? When the user clicks the alert button. So I could go to my alert button, right click it and say create dynamic action. Or I could go into my dynamic actions tab and then right click anywhere on, I know mine's going to be on click, so I could create a dynamic action here. And then I just select, we'll call this, you give it a name, so I'll call this alert the user. When, of course, is on click, and I need to tell it on click of what. So I want to be on click of my button, which is alert. There's no client-side condition here. We always want it to happen. Now, of course, I need to tell it my action. So this is my when. My action, it defaults to show. You'll always get that as the default, but I would like to choose a notification. I'm going to do an alert. So now I have my action set, and I need to tell it what to tell the user. So these are the settings that correspond to my action. Give it some text, and that's it. So there's no affected elements here. There's nothing else that I need to do. So if I were to save the page and run it, we should get, when I click the button, we should see our alert. Pretty simple. We didn't have to write any JavaScript to make that happen. APEX did everything behind the scenes. So to review, the when of our action was on click of our button, our alert button. The action itself was to alert the user, and the affected element, there wasn't one. We didn't have to do that for our simple example. Easy, right? So let's help out our developer. Now that we know the basics of dynamic actions, I think we can try to tackle the requirements that George, our developer, received and see if we can help him out. So the first thing that he needed to do was that when the job is changed to salesman, the commission field should be displayed. Otherwise, it should be hidden. So for this example, we're going to need to use that client-side condition. The client-side condition determines if true or false actions are fired. If the condition evaluates to true, then the true actions fire. If the condition evaluates to false, then the false actions fire. If no condition is specified, only true actions will fire. So let's take a look at that in our app. So here we have our list of employees, and if we go into one of these, let's see, a salesman, we should see the commission field. If we go into, let's say, a clerk, we should not see the commission field, right? It's gone. And if we're inside of a salesman here and we change the job to something else, we see it disappear. Now let's go through and see how we made this happen. So let's edit the page. And so what should the when be of this dynamic action? When the job is changed is what we want to trigger the display of the commission. So we'll go down to the job field and create a dynamic action. We just called that dynamic action hide show commission. It's going to have a true action and a false action. So inside of the dynamic action, we're going to add a client-side condition. This is going to be, when you add a client-side condition, you can pick from a lot of preset values. We want to use the one where item equals value. So when job equals salesman, we want the true actions to fire. When job is not equal to salesman, we want the false action to fire. So what is our action? We want to show the commission when the job equals salesman. So here we choose the show action, and then you're going to select an affected element. Our affected element in this case is our commission. We want to show it. So we just add that into the affected element section. For the false action, it's just the exact opposite. You want to hide the commission when the job is anything other than salesman. So it's the same thing here. And in Apex, there's a really easy way to create that. As soon as you have your true action, you can right-click and say create opposite action. And then you'll get basically a duplicate of the action that you had, but with opposite. So for here, it was show, and now we have hide. And that is it for this dynamic action. There's one more important piece here. I showed you when you come into the page and you're not a salesman, you see on clerk, the commission's gone. How did we make that happen? Because that really didn't happen on change of our job. If you notice on your actions themselves, you have this here called fire when event, or fire on initialization, and I've set it to yes. What this means is when the page loads, that it's going to evaluate whether or not this condition has been met. So it's going to automatically hide or show the commission on page load so that your page is correctly set for the user when they come into an already loaded form. So that's really important to make sure your users have the proper state when they go into a page. All right. So for that
Jackie,
example, yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. Got a question here that came in, and it's Apex eventually converts dynamic actions into JavaScript code, right?
Correct.
And would it be possible for you to show the JavaScript code that's generated by Apex in the browser's dev tool? Or we can do this at the end.
I don't think so. I don't know how. It might be possible. I've never done it. I'll put it that way.
Okay. All right.
I'm sure if you dig enough, you probably can find it.
Great. Thanks, Jackie.
All right. So for that example, the when was on change of our job or on page load because we set that fire on initialization to true or yes. And then our action, we had two. You could hide the commission or show the commission based on that optional client-side condition. And then our affected element was our condition field itself. So this slide is just about that fire on initialization. I wanted you guys to have it in case you downloaded it. You could see what that means. So it's just that the action will also be fired on page load. A lot of times it's something to check if you have a dynamic action that's firing when you don't think it should. Maybe you should check and see if this is set to yes when it should be no. It's a good place to look. So the second requirement that we needed to do was on the employees report. The project manager wanted to be able to search and have the report filter as she types. She didn't want to have to press enter or any button to have the results show. She wanted instant results. So let's take a look at that. So if we go to our employees report, what I've done here is I have a region with the employees, and then I also have just an item that I'm using for the filter. And in this item, you can type in anything you want to. I'll type in, just start typing, and as I type, you notice that you can see it changing the results, it automatically updating. So this is exactly what she wanted. So how did we do this? So if we go into the page, what I've done is we've created a dynamic action. So when did we want to do this action? We wanted to do it on when the user is typing in our text field. So that's kind of on, you have a couple of options here. What I chose to do was on key release, I wanted to filter my report. So I created my item on key release of my search field. So every time the user releases a key, it's going to refresh that report. This, of course, the action is refresh, and the affected element is the region itself, our employees region. Something really important that we need to do is in the query itself, so in our employees region, we need to, of course, include our aware clause that contains our search. So what I have here is if the search is null, it's going to show everything. Or if they've entered something in, it's going to show records that are like what the user entered. And it's really important whenever you have a page item in the where clause, you need to add it to your page items to submit. So this, every time the dynamic action fires or on page load, the text item is going to be submitted so that it's in session state and that we can run this query again with the proper results. And that is it. This one is really simple, but also really cool for the end user. So it's pretty slick. Okay, so just to recap on that one, the when was on key release of the search. You could also do it on key press of enter if you wanted them to press enter at the end, but we just wanted it on every key. So key release is what I chose. The action is to refresh the report region, and the affected element was the region itself, the employees region. The third thing that the project manager wanted was, again, on the form of the employees table. When a bonus is entered, she wants to be able to populate the total with the sum of the salary and the bonus automatically to kind of eliminate human error and make sure that it gets done. So if we go back to our application and go to the set value demo, we have our employees report again, and if we choose one of these guys, we should see now that we have a bonus here and we have a total. So if I enter something into the bonus, let's say 500, and I get out of that field, the total is automatically set to the sum of the two values of the salary and the bonus. So if we take a look at this page, we're going to need to determine our when. So our when is when our bonus field changes. Okay, so we'll go to bonus. We have a dynamic action. I called it calculate total. The when event was on change. of the item bonus. There's no client-side condition. You want this to happen every time the user changes the bonus. And our action is, of course, to set the value. So we want to set a value of our total. To do that, I'm going to use a JavaScript expression. And I know I told you didn't have to know a lot of JavaScript, but I want to teach you just enough so that you can do some of these basic things. And once you know this, you can expand on it and get as fancy as you want to. So our JavaScript expression is basically we're grabbing the value of our salary from the page, and then we're grabbing the value of our bonus from the page. And this APEX item, apex.item, is a JavaScript API provided by Apex. So it's really easy to use. You can just call it and say get value. And then I wrapped it in number. JavaScript does really weird things with numbers, so you want to make sure that you're adding two numbers together and not a number and a string. So just to avoid crazy JavaScript math, I wrapped them both in number. Once this gets evaluated, it adds them together. We want to put the value that we're setting into our affected element, which would be the total. So I chose item and then our total. That is completely it for this. When you run the page, you get a really slick functionality, so automatically changing the value of the total. And you can, of course, get way more fancy, but it's just a really easy way to solve a common problem. All right. So the when of that was on change of our bonus field. The action, we're setting the value, calculating the total, and then our affected element was the total itself. So I wanted to go over a little bit about that JavaScript API that I mentioned to you. So the ones that I showed you are the two at the bottom. So the Apex item API, I showed you the get value, where you just call Apex item, you put the name of the page item without the colon, doesn't need it here, and you either use get value or set value. Set value does what it says. It sets the value of that item. You provide the value in the call to set value. But I want you to be aware, this is kind of the newer way of using JavaScript APIs in Apex. There is an older syntax, which is the $V, $S. $V is the same as get value. $S is the same as set value. I want you to be able to recognize them in case you're maintaining an application that maybe uses the older notation. You're aware of what they are. The fourth thing that we needed to do was to delete a row from a report without navigating to the details page. So currently, deleting a row from the employees table takes a lot of clicking or window switching. Clicking the edit button, you open a window, you click delete, you click OK, you close the window, and then you see the page refresh. She wants this done from the report itself instead of on a form. So apparently she doesn't like to waste a lot of time when she fires people. So let's see how we do this. Okay, if we go into our application and go to our delete row example, let's think about what we want to do. So here, what I've done is added a trash can. So instead of going in, clicking on a person and clicking delete and confirming and all that good stuff, all we really want to do is click on the trash can and say, yes, we do want to delete this person, and we want to see them disappear. So really easy. It's really easy for the user, and it's pretty easy for us to accomplish. So let's look at this page. So the first thing we need to do is we need to take our report and actually add a place for the user to click on so that they can delete the row. So to the query of the report, I just added a a column, a null column, and I called it remove. So this is where I'm going to put my little trash can icon that I had on the screen. So in that column, if we go into the remove column, I set it to be a link so that when we click on it, it does something. I don't really want to use the link to go to a page. So all I did was I set it as a URL, and then I told it to basically do nothing. So at this point, if I hadn't done anything else, if I clicked the trash can, nothing would happen. It's just an empty link. Now I wanted to make the link look nice. So here in the link text, all I did was I added the font Apex trash icon. You could pick whatever icon you wanted to. I knew that one, so I selected that, put in the class for it, and then I just put the ARIA hidden equal to true. And the ARIA, it stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. If you're not familiar with that, it's like accessibility. So ARIA hidden it's for screen readers. So if screen readers sometimes have trouble with the icons, like the font awesome, font Apex icons. So this just tells it to kind of skip over it. In the link attributes, we did a couple really important things. So I added a class called remove imp. That is what I'm going to use to identify when the user clicks the trash can. So I need to know exactly when the user clicks that icon. And then we also need to know what employee they wanted to remove. So I'm adding some data into my link. So I'm using this data ID. You can use the ID is arbitrary. I called it ID because it's the ID of the employee. You could do data dash any name you wanted. If you wanted to pass a color, you could do data dash color. It's arbitrary. It's up to you what you name it. And then this passes. It's the substitution string for the imp no column of that row. So in my link, I will have the ID of the employee and a class that tells me that they clicked the trash can. So if you actually wanted to see that, you could inspect one of these links, and in your console, you should actually be able to see that ID of that row. So this might not be the most secure thing. This is just an example of something you can do. You might not want to use an ID here, but I'm just showing you this technique so that you can build on it. So we've got that there. The next thing that we need to do is we need a place to put this ID once the user clicks on the trash can. So I made a hidden page item called impno to delete. And it's hidden. An important thing to do is set the value protected to no. If you change an item using a dynamic action, you need to make sure that's set to no, or you'll get some session state protection errors when you run the page and try to change that value. And then the last and most important thing we need to do is actually create our dynamic action. So I've created a dynamic action on click of our trash can. So how do we know they clicked the trash can? We created that really neat class and put it on our link called remove imp. So I set my when event to be on click of a jQuery selector called remove imp. Okay, there's no client-side condition. Anytime they click a trash can, we want this to happen. But an important thing to note is that we changed this event scope to dynamic. And what that does is it makes the whole page basically listen for your event instead of just the item that's triggering it. If you just want the item that's triggering it to listen, you can choose static. If you only want the event to happen one time, you can choose once. Dynamic means that even if something on the page is refreshed, rewritten, that listener will still remain and you'll still be able to delete multiple rows. This is really easy to catch if you were to run the page and you were only able to delete one record, and then the second time you click a trash can, nothing happened. You know you need to change your event scope to dynamic. So We have actually 4 actions with this dynamic action. First thing we want to know is if the user really meant to click on that icon. So we want to confirm with the user. We're going to have the confirm action, and the settings is just some text. So do you really want to remove this employee? A confirm action is kind of like an if statement inside of a dynamic action. So if they click yes, the rest of the stack underneath it gets executed. If they click no, the rest, it stops there. Nothing else happens. So you would just be done if they clicked no. So the set value is our next action. We want to grab the ID of the employee that the user, of the trash can that the user clicked, and we want to place it into our hidden page item so that we can use it later. So what we're doing is we're doing a set value. So we're going to use a little JavaScript expression to grab that data ID that I set. So we're going to use this.triggering element, which basically gives us access to the properties of the element that triggered our action. So in this case, our link, our little trash can. Inside of that link, we've got our data set, which is that data dash, whatever you called it. I called mine ID, so I place ID here. If you called it something else, you would put whatever that was right here. That is going to grab that value, and it's going to put it inside of the affected element. So here we're putting it into our page item, our hidden item. The next thing we want to do is actually delete the employee. So this, we're going to do an execute PL/SQL code. So the PL/SQL code is really simple. I just did delete from emp where the employee number equals our hidden page item. So what we just grabbed. A really important step here is you need to put that item in items to submit. If you don't do this, it won't know what to delete. Nothing will happen. So you need to make sure that that is set. The last thing you need to do is refresh the region to show that you've actually deleted the person. So we're going to do a refresh as our action, and our affected element is the region we want to refresh. So I chose region, and you select employee. That is it for this. Now, a couple of things here is these two, select or execute PL/SQL code and the refresh, they don't live wholly in the client side. So the execute PL/SQL code is going to do an AJAX call, and it's going to rerun your query, or it's going to run the delete statement. The refresh is going to do another AJAX call. It's going to hit the database, and it's going to rerun the query of the report. That is really it for this dynamic action. It's a little bit more complex, but it's really slick, and it's kind of a common thing that people want to be able to do. You don't always want to have to go into another page to remove something.
Jackie?
Yes, sir.
Can I put a couple of questions to you just before
Sure.
we continue to make sure I myself don't get too lost in where they actually apply either? The first question is, and I believe it had to do when you were searching, doing a search at the top of the pages, the query will be executed for each letter typed?
Yes, that is correct. So that's what I just said now about the AJAX call. I'm actually going to have a slide on it in just a second, but yes, that refresh and execute PL/SQL code, they will hit the server. So they will do an AJAX call, rerun the query of whatever it is that they need to do, and then come back to you with the results.
Great. Okay. And then there was another question, which was, will this work if the total page item is display only? I honestly, I don't remember exactly where that applied to.
Yes, it should work if it's display only. There might need to be a little tweak, but you can change. You should be able to change it if it's display only. There might be another setting you need to check, but I can make an example of that and put it in my app as well.
Okay. The next question is that value in session or just in the browser? And I think that had to do with something you were toggling between whether it applied to the user session or not.
So I'm not exactly sure what the question is on,
yeah.
but
Sorry, I don't have
if
the
I'm using
context
the
on that one.
JavaScript API, so if I'm using that Apex item get value or set value, that is client side, not hidden session. When I do the set value, it's just client side. If that's where the question is coming from, like when I set the value of an item, it's client side only at this point until you submit the page or submit the item.
Okay.
Hopefully that clarifies. If it doesn't, ask
yeah, yeah. I'll ask the person who asked it. I'll ask them we've asked them to put it back into context. Next question is: do you need to commit that delete statement? If not, why not?
Apex does implicit commits, so it is already done for you.
Great. And I think that's it. Okay, that's it so far for the questions.
Okay.
There's a bit of people are talking amongst themselves too. So let's continue. Thanks very much.
Sounds good. Okay, so I just want to recap on the delete. It was kind of the most complex example we'll go over. So the when of that was on click of the delete icon. We made a little trash can as our jQuery selector. The action, we had 4. So you wanted to confirm, you wanted to set the hidden page item, you want to delete the record and then refresh the report. And then you also had 2 affected elements. You had the hidden item itself to grab the value of the employee record. And then you also had the report region when you refreshed it and reran the query. This is just some slides on the kind of more complicated things I did so that you have them for reference. This is showing you the classes that I added, so we could use them as the jQuery selector in our actions, and then adding the data elements to your link. And of course, you could add more than one data element. I could have a string of data elements there. You could add as many as you like into your link, whatever you need to accomplish the task you're trying to do. And then this is just showing you, if you inspect the page, you see that data ID in there. Like I said, again, this is not good security practices to put your primary keys inside of the link, but it's showing you the concept. So you can apply security to it when you do it. And then this is this triggering element that we use to grab the value of the ID of the employee. And then AJAX. So like y'all asked, the partial page refresh. So we refreshed that region, and then we also did the delete statement. Those 2 things did an AJAX call to the database. You didn't see the screen, like nothing, you didn't have to submit the page. It did it behind the scenes. AJAX stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So it allows the client to talk to the server in the background without reloading or submitting the entire page. And then our refresh and execute PL SQL code are examples of AJAX calls inside of dynamic actions. And then the really important thing to remember is our event scope. So static is only the component that the event is tied to will be listening for that event, and it will disappear if that item is refreshed with a partial page refresh. So in our example, if we had put static here, the listener would have been tied to our little link, our trash can icon. There would have been a 1 link per row, really. And as soon as you click on the delete and you get to the refresh action, it's going to rewrite or partially do a partial page refresh of that employee's region. And with that refresh, it's going to wipe those listeners. So the next time you tried to click a trash can, they would be gone. By setting it to dynamic, the whole page is listening for the event. So the partial page refresh does not have any effect on the listener. It's on another level. So you can sit on that page and delete as many employees as you want, and you're not going to affect your event listener. And then once, of course, just means that as soon as you use it, it's gone. The event will only happen one time. You don't have to wait for a partial page refresh for it to disappear. And then our last requirement was to make the notification stand out to the user. She wants to make sure that you can't ignore it, everyone sees it, and she knows everyone's read it. So I had an idea to use a dynamic action plugin to solve this problem. And a really good place to get plugins is apex.world. So there's lots of great content on apex.world. You should check it out for other things. But for now, I just wanted to show you kind of the plugin page. You just go to the top, click on the plugins tab, search for whatever it is you're looking for, any keywords, or just browse, and then you can download the plugin from there. So let's take a look. So here is our notification page. And as you can see, it wiggles when I come on here. So it draws my attention to it as soon as I see it. I added this little reload button just so I could make it wiggle again without doing anything. But what I did here is I wanted to use a plugin. I know that the AnimApex plugin was available and I'd been waiting for a place to put it. So I went and downloaded it on apex.world. I installed it. I went to shared components. I followed the directions, set it up. It's really easy. And then as soon as you do that, I don't want to go through the steps of importing a plugin. That's not the important part here. The important thing to know is as soon as I do that, the AnimApex plugin is available from the list of plugins, just like anything else. You'll see it says plugin next to it. So I can select it and it will have the settings that it needs, and it's that easy after it's installed. Using a dynamic action plugin is really simple. If it doesn't do it out of the box with Apex what you need, check the plugins and you can add them in really simply. So the when on my page is on page load. So here I chose on page load. All I want to do is I want to have my AnimApex plugin animate my notification. So I'll choose one. Let's make it bounce. And then my affected elements for this action is, of course, my region. And that's really that simple. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with AnimApex, but I'm going to use a really basic thing and just make it bounce. So now it bounces instead of wiggles. So it's just maybe not the most practical example, but I just want you to see how dynamic action plugins become part of Apex when you install them. So on that one, it was really simple. Our when was on page load. Our action was to animate the region using our plugin. And then the affected element was, of course, our notification region. So we did it. It took us maybe 30 minutes or so, and we were able to solve all of our developers' problems with dynamic actions and maybe just a few lines of JavaScript code. Apex did most all of the hard work for us. We didn't have to write any JavaScript or jQuery or CSS. And it showed us, I maybe showed you a couple of tricks on how to do a little bit of JavaScript and jQuery, but with those tiny examples, you can take your applications pretty far without really adding much to them, especially if you check out that JavaScript API. Most of the work is taken care of by Apex. So the most important question is, how does our developer feel about this? And he's happy. He feels awesome. His app now looks great. He didn't spend a lot of time on the changes, and he didn't have to stay up all night learning JavaScript. He's ready to show it to his project manager, and she loves it. She's excited. The app does everything she wanted, and it didn't take the developer very long to do it, so she's happy. And she's probably just fired somebody using that easy delete that we created with our dynamic action. So if you want to learn more about dynamic actions, there's a really good reference, dynamic dynamic-actions.com. You can log in there and peruse through a lot of dynamic actions, and then you can also get a copy of the application to go through yourself. I recommend looking at the dynamic actions packaged application, installing that, and kind of picking apart examples. And then, of course, I'll make my demo application available as well. Do we have any other questions?
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Jackie. Yeah, one of the questions was, will this demo application be available? And
yes,
so
sir.
You already answered that, so that's great. We have one of the earlier questions we had, and I want to get to it right away because it came in quite early. If you have time, could you explain event scope, that is dynamic, static, if you could explain that once?
Yes. So dynamic, I don't know if I touched on this before or after this question, but the dynamic is where your listener is tied to the item that is listening, or the triggering element of your dynamic action. Or static, sorry. So it's tied to the item if it's static. If it's dynamic, your listener is tied to the page. This is important when you do partial page refresh of probably the region that your triggering element is living in. So if that region should get deleted or refreshed at some point during the course of a single page view, then you want to make sure that your event's dynamic. Static, it will disappear when that partial page refresh happens. And then once, of course, is the event only happens one time, and then it's gone. You don't need to wait for a page refresh in order for that to happen.
Okay, great. Another question we have here is, can Jackie show the region in the last example?
Is that?
Oh, I wonder which example that was.
Let us know which example. And I'm happy to show it.
I guess I'll ask the person who asked that question, which is Anderson, to please give us a bit more context. Also, another question is, with those dynamic actions, how can I refresh an image based on URL or right way item with URL is updated?
I don't think I understand the question.
Let me try that again. With those dynamic actions, how can I refresh an image based on URL right away item with URL is updated? Or
so on change of the item that, like, I'm assuming maybe there's an item that contains the URL. So on change of that item, you would trigger a dynamic action to refresh possibly your region that contains the image. That would be my guess. I'm not sure if I'm understanding correctly.
Okay, hopefully that's it. And if not, I'm sure he'll write out.
You can email me too. It's fine. Give me your context.
Yep. Okay. Oh, another interesting question. Is there a minimum version of AJAX to follow these examples?
No, I think these will work in any version of AJAX, at least for sure 4 and up. I think. And then there's more dynamic actions available for like touch events and stuff like that that I didn't cover in the newer versions of AJAX.
Okay.
I believe that's correct. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they work.
Okay. Next question is, what about dynamic action interactive grid?
The grid does support dynamic actions. I don't have an example here that's of working with a grid, but you can trigger dynamic actions from a grid.
Okay, I'm just scanning down the list here. Yeah, and I think, again, people are asking where to get access to the demo app. I mean, we'll definitely provide it by email to every single person who's attending, So Jackie, all you have to do is give us the link.
I will hand it over to you. You
Fantastic.
can
And
distribute it.
we will distribute it to every lucky person who has seen your very, very interesting presentation. Um, okay, I believe that covers all the questions.
Perfect.
So,
Like I said, if there's questions, feel free to ping me. You guys know where to reach me, I'm sure.
okay, well, great. Well, and it is almost an hour, so I'm going to bring this to a close. So thank you, everyone, so much for attending. And if we didn't get to your question, you can certainly email Jackie, or you can email us at info@insum.ca. It'll get to Jackie. Don't worry. And that really wraps it up for dive into dynamic actions. And please stay tuned to our website, insum.ca, for further information on new webinars, which will be coming up because we'll never run out of webinars. We have a lot of experts here who have a lot of good information to give out, as exemplified today. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time and attention, and have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much. Goodbye.